3 or 4 times now at various conferences, both as a presenter of sessions, workshop sessions, and also as keynote speaker. And I guess the reason why I wanted you to bring him up here today to talk to you is that I tend to agree with a lot of his ideas, a lot of the things that he either writes or talks about in his workshops. Some of them are controversial, some of them are innovative, most of them are innovative, and I think he's got a good handle where we need to be going in our school districts in the area of technology implementation and just school change in general. And I'm sure he's going to talk more about than just technology today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan November.
Are you applauding because you're not in class? And those kids are out on a hot sunny day and not sitting in your rooms. That's it, isn't it? It is great, yeah. It's great to be here and not in Chicago, too. You know, you have hilly land. This is hilly land. It's very hilly. I don't think you realize how hilly it is. You're from Chicago. Someone else, I asked if Lake Wobegon, I know that's a stupid thing for someone like me to ask, but I asked if Lake Wobegon was nearby. And they said, yes, this is the school system people transfer into from Lake Wobegon, where more than half the kids are above average, or all the kids are above average, aren't they? I mean, look at you. This is like a pure white audience. It must be all above average. It's unbelievable. But it is very strange. The cultural changes in this country are not reflected in this room. In California, I think 2 years ago, the majority of students in that state were not white. And next year that will be true in Texas. And it will continue to be so. And so it is strange. Frankly, it is very strange for me, because I travel a lot, mostly to big cities. I rarely get a chance to come to clean, open air spaces. And it's very unusual for me to see an audience that looks like you. Sure. So I hope I can relate. I mean, I try to relate. I'm a little wacky. I asked somebody who didn't know me, is it okay to be wacky? And they said, it's the only way to relate to this audience is to be wacky at the end of the school year. And I can relate to that. I work in a high school near Chicago, half-time, and I have a clause in my contract that says I don't have to come to meetings like this. So I have a real feel for you being here, because I wouldn't be here listening to me. Even knowing me, I definitely wouldn't. So, but you are, and you have to be here, so we'll make the best of it. And I'll tell you what. The way I got here, historically, is I got a phone call one day in 1988 saying that I had won the Christa McAuliffe, and I didn't apply. So I said, that's a mistake. I didn't apply. And they said, no, you won. We've decided that you've won. And I said, well, what does this mean? And they said, well, we're going to put you on an airplane every other month or so for a year. We're going to send you around the country. We want you out of your classroom so that you can see what's happening in the country in terms of technology and change. I want to introduce you to government leaders and industry people, entertainers, military. And I said, no, thank you. I went home and told my wife I got this phone call, and she said, call them back. Get out of the house. Go. So I called them back the next day, and they were still holding a place for me, and they took me. And off I went. And I've never been the same since. It's, in fact, one of the guys that year, there were 5 of us who got this phone call. We were sent around together. They didn't send us alone. We were able to reflect with colleagues. Jeff Hulte, at that time, was in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and now he's in St. Louis Park. I just saw him this morning. And what's interesting is that 4 out of 5 of us of that year within 2 years, we're no longer working for the school systems where we started. Because of what I'm going to try to do to you today, we would come back from our travels and try to share what we saw with our colleagues. Now, if you were in my school, at that time I was in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and your colleagues had smoking duty and lunch duty and hall duty, and you're off on an airplane on these long weekend junkets, it's like not fair. And you come back and you say, guess what I saw? And they say, but that doesn't relate to what we're doing. And then one day I even accused the math teachers. I said, how long do you think Algebra 1 is going to last? And they said, you know, forever. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think it's probably going to end soon. And they didn't get it. They didn't get it at all. I don't understand why they didn't get it, because I got it, you know. I get it. And since 1988, I've gotten a little better at telling the story. And the best part about me telling you this story is you'll never see me again. I'm gone. So you don't have to deal with me. And you didn't know me before I got shifted in my head. So you'll probably be able to hear it better than my colleagues. But what's sad, I'll tell you what's sad, we really had to leave, the four of us. Really couldn't stay anymore. We were so disruptive. And good friends, you know? And since then, things have just speeded up even more. I mean, the kinds of things that we saw in 1988, well, I used to be able to imagine things that did not exist. And I would say to my colleagues, one day this will exist. And now things are happening so fast that I'm very disappointed in myself. Things are invented that I've never imagined. And it's reversed on me. I'm not there anymore. I'm now mainstream, which is a very weird feeling. When you used to think you were at the leading edge. I'm not at the leading edge anymore. Because things are happening so fast. Well, anyway, that's how I think I got here, by sort of traveling around. I was minding my own business. I really was. Not disrupting anybody. And then I got this call. Now, all I do is disrupt people. It's a profession. And let me tell you that since then, yesterday, this is just true, yesterday, walked into my superintendent's office. I work about 90 days a year now. And I said, I want to work 10 days next year. Is that okay? He said, yes, 10 days is fine. It's good. 10 days is about as much as we can take. And so I'm down to 10 days in a school system because, frankly, from my work outside of school, I spent a lot of work in corporate contracts, telephone companies, George Lucas is a client, high-tech companies, the military. It's really fun. This is an unbelievable fun time if you know stuff about education technology and you want to see the world, you can. In fact, I moved to Chicago from Boston. Wellesley, where I was near Boston, just to be near O'Hare Airport so I could get in and out quick. A lot of teachers don't move to places because of airports. I think I'm one of a small group. Are there any questions so far? Okay, here comes the wacky part. Any questions in the home viewing audience? Are you? No? I don't see any questions. All right. Here we go. Here we go. This is just what it looks like. You see this at home? There. Toilet seat. Phone company gave this to me after I gave a speech to state legislatures in Pennsylvania. It was a comment on my preparation, I think. Anyway, I take this almost everywhere I go, you'll see in a moment. And the fun part for me is going through security at O'Hare, where I have soft luggage and it goes through the belt. And I love to watch the faces of the security guards, because this shows up perfectly on their screen, right through they stop the belt and they point at me. They call their friends over and they got a lot of guys standing behind there wondering, why do I have a toilet seat in my luggage? Anyway, imagine one of my clients is Motorola. They're near Chicago in this place called Schaumburg. Motorola is a great company. in terms of financial success. These people, that there's a Motorola telephone that I'm about to step on, somebody left here. Motorola does a lot of staff development. In fact, a lot of companies do a lot of staff development. In fact, a lot of companies do a lot more staff development than schools do. And they call it staff development. But at Motorola, they say that the average engineer, professional, who works for the company is probably in staff development 2 or 3 days a week. And I just got a call yesterday from the Edison project. Do you know Edison in New York? They own Channel 1, and Edison is designing schools. In fact, you seem to have a very nice superintendent, but I'm going to guess that within this decade, your school board will be approached by a private company and make a bid to manage your schools, so that your next superintendent probably will not be a single man or woman, but will be a company, and you'll buy into all kinds of services, staff development and so forth. Anyway, Edison asked me to bid on their staff development part of their company. And I said, well, tell me about the design of your schools. Tell me what I should be thinking about. And in Edison schools, the average teacher gets 2.5 hours of staff development a day and 6 hours a week. This is Edison's model of what it means to treat professionals in a professional way. Very similar to Motorola, very similar to Microsoft. What Edison has done is they've looked out across the countryside and they've taken a look at companies and other organizations too, the military, for example, and they said, all right, in a high-tech, information-based world, how often do professionals need to be learning? And frankly, the average is about half the time. The average teacher in the United States gets 1 to 3 days a year. So there's a huge difference in the culture here compared to a bunch of my other clients. And in fact, frankly, I'll just say this, I'm much more appreciated outside of education than I am inside of education. Because, don't laugh, I saw that. You see, inside education, if I say Algebra 1 is not going to go on forever, that's a ludicrous idea in education. In the corporate side, they'd say, okay, tell us the better way to do it. There just would be no... In fact, in my own school, yesterday I ran a big meeting, technology, and we're trying to figure out whether we want to make a requirement for all kids to have proficiency in various technologies in order to graduate. Things like word processing, databases, telecommunications, graphics, the whole slew of stuff out there. Should students have proficiency? And should we know what they can do? In the entire discussion, the driving limit to whether we can do that was not to mess with any existing course. We all agreed at the beginning of the meeting that, yes, students should have proficiency. And then we tried to say, okay, how do we fit it into the curriculum? Rule 1, you can't wipe out any existing courses. Well, Rule 2, you can't add a slot to the beginning of the day or the end of the day. Sports at the end, buses in the beginning, can't add any more time. And you know what? You know where we were at the end of a 2-hour conversation? Nowhere. Because the basic rule of schools is you can make any change you want as long as you don't have an impact on any adults. Then you can talk change all day long. As long as we don't mess with your time, your schedule, your relationships, your course structure, it's all open game. Well, that makes me very disruptive in a culture like this, and much more interesting and more valuable in a culture that wants to just seek excellence and is willing to let go of current reality. So, but they told me to come here, so here I am. Okay, back to the toilet, yeah? Now, Motorola, we're going to link all this together. At Motorola, they do staff development, and they hire some very expensive people to come in to move the group to a mental space where you can suspend your belief system. Motorola is convinced that if you try to improve on current reality, you really won't think. What you have to be able to do for a group is help them to let go of current reality. So they're feeling very uncomfortable. They don't know where the truth is. And it's only when you can get a group of adults to let go of current reality that you can just begin to move them to think about what might be. All right, so this is my attempt to get you to let go of current reality. Here's the toilet. Imagine we're going to apply a supercomputer to your toilet in your bathroom. Take the world's most powerful computer, stick it to the toilet system somehow to improve your life. Right? Make your life, think about what you do with your bathroom, who manages the space, who maintains it, how it's used during the day. And we want to make your life less hassled, more entertaining, just all around improve your quality of your life. Supercomputer in a toilet. What features would you like to see? And this is not a rhetorical question. Think. What features could you add with a supercomputer connected to your bathroom toilet? You know, there's a student here, and he's probably wondering, what are all these teachers doing listening to a toilet problem? It's okay. You can stay there and listen, but just don't tell your friends what we were doing here today, okay? One idea? Yes. Heat? Yes. In Minnesota? Yes. In fact, it would know if you're regular and be tied into AccuWeather forecast and heat up just before you get there. Because you don't want to wait for heat in this state. Yes. It lifts the lid? It lifts the lid. This is the 90s. It goes both ways. It has a sex recognizer, and it knows who's coming. Up and down. Remember that. Up and down. Up and down. Gosh. Anybody else have that? Yes? Self-cleaning. Self-cleaning. You could do that. They do that at O'Hare. At American Airlines. I've tracked toilets at all the airline terminals. American O'Hare, you push a button, and you get a clean seat. It's fantastic, if you're worried about that kind of thing. Yes? Flushes automatically. Does that? Flushes automatically. Way back in the tie, yes.
An external blow dryer to keep off
An external?
An external dryer to keep off condensation.
Oh, condensation, like on the back tank. It's a good thing you explained that. Is that what you're worried about? The condensation on the back tank? Because I can imagine another blow dryer part of that. Is that, yes? A shocking device? Yeah, we could do that. This is your own home, remember? You want to do that? Back here, yes.
Fragrance regulator.
Yes. We can do that. Fragrance regulator, counterbalancer kind of thing. I've been told that in Japan, in public bathrooms, on the women's side, women don't like to be heard. And they have a sound counterbalancer. Of course, your timing would have to be really good. Push that. Make it work. What else? Any other? While I'm mentioning, told you this would be wacky. While I'm mentioning Japan, let me just give you a challenge. I'm not making this up. Last year, 80,000 people spent $20,000 on a high-tech toilet in Singapore and Japan. And you haven't come up with the $20,000 value yet. Yes? Recycled water. That's not worth $20,000, but it could do that. It would have a density analyzer and what was deposited, and it's designed for the worst case every time now, isn't it? Just push that much through that needs to go. Yes?
Tying it to hospitals?
Yes. That's what it is. The phone line is tied directly to your toilet. This is the serious part now. It's serious. Phone line is tied directly to the toilet. It does a complete urine analysis every time you go. And it can check for things like colon cancer. And more will be learned about measuring bodies. You see, every time you go, you're putting a lot of information in the toilet. It's there. It might as well be used. This is the way it is. Now, let me put this down for a second and try to analyze in some formal way what just happened. And most of you did not suspend your belief system. You were really functioning on what's the current model of a toilet. And there are two key words here in the technology planning game that I need to define, because these two ways to think about technology either get in the way or help us think about it in new ways. One way to think about technology is called automation. That's a fairly common term. Lots of people know what that means. And it's my opinion, as I travel around, and I do that a lot through here, that 99.9% of all that we're doing with technology is automation. That is, we're taking a look at what did we do before we got computers, we're adding computers to that stuff. So we have writing labs. Kids go to writing labs, they have the same teacher they had before, the same assignments. Now they're going to a writing lab, and they can write faster. And their spelling can be better if there's a spell checker, and grammar can be better. If they know something about grammar, they can use a grammar checker. And that's called automation, because you're doing what you always did before. Now, with automation, you only get incremental improvement. Don't be fooled. Just because a lot of kids are going to a writing lab and they're enjoying writing more, that's the equivalent of the seat warming up and saving water. You're adding technology to current reality. It's not worth $20,000. Now, I know I've just disturbed a whole bunch of people in the room, but that's my job. My job is to try to challenge you to think that maybe the very best applications that you think you're using with technology aren't the end game. So just don't take it personal. Just let me get away with this for a moment. The other word in the technology planning game is called informating. Excuse me. Informating is not as common a word as automation because many fewer people do it. Informating means that you take technology and you literally change the primary business of the organization, and you can get huge gains in productivity, like saving your life. See, with this toilet, the reason that 80,000 people went out and spent the $20,000 is because as we grow older and diseases like diabetes set in and colon cancer and others, you want the information that is created to be used at that moment. You don't want to go to checkup time 2 years from now. You want real-time medicine. And this is the big concept for me in technology planning. The difference between what I call school time or paper time and real time. Schools operate in or on paper time. Paper is the dominant technology of our existing curriculum. Our language is just imbued with the words paper. I'm going to assign papers. I'm going to correct papers. I'm going to take care of paperwork. Paper, paper, paper. Now, as a technology, I think you all know that paper is linear. Once you print it, you can't change it. The book is printed, and you're not going to change it. You start at chapter 1, go all the way through. Okay. Now, if we add technology to a paper-created curriculum, we're only going to get incremental improvement. Show me your best writers in a word processing lab. Your very best writers. And I bet I can get them to be that good without a computer. Do you believe that? Now, for some kids like me who can't write well, physically, my teachers could never read my writing. And for some kids like me who are not well organized in their heads the first time, I'm very abstract, as you can tell, very random. the word processor is a godsend, absolute godsend for people like me. In fact, I now write books and write articles, and if my high school English teachers knew what I was doing today, they would just be in shock. Just in shock. But I'm not a better writer because I have computers than some of the very best writers in my high school that didn't have computers. It helps some kids really well. Other kids makes probably no difference at all. You get incremental improvement with word processing. But now, if we were going to move to real time, like the toilet is in real-time medicine, what would schools look like? And what I'd like to do is show a 4-minute video of classroom, and maybe just before I do, give you another story, example before the video, so you fit it in to other examples. Real time. It turns out that if I were a Martian, and I were to come down to the planet, and I were to go to your high school, maybe your junior high, and my job was to report back to my superiors, what business are children in? What's the main business of children? What's their job description in a school? What do you think I would report back? I knew nothing about the culture. What would I report back to my Martian superiors? What is the job description of kids? It's a tough one, isn't it? It's a tough one. What I would report back is I would say that the kids are in the test preparation business. That's what I would report back. I'd report back that the big people are hired because they know stuff. And it's their job to teach the kids what they already know. And when kids get the books, they know that almost all the problems in that book have already been solved. Now it's just their turn. Is that fair? I report back that every week paper goes back and forth, and exams are recorded, and they move on. And the definition of Spanish 1, the year ends. Exam, final exam. Kids are in the test preparation business. That's a paper-based business, linear. I don't want to add technology to the test preparation business. It's easy to teach kids what we already know. That's the easiest part of education. Give you an example of real time. Classroom. It turns out that acid rain is a systems problem. It takes a whole continent of lots of different systems to create acid rain. And there are a lot of 4th through 6th grade kids all over the country. Many of them are near a body of water. And National Geographic, maybe you're doing it in this town, has a product called KidsNet. And one of their units there is to ask children to identify a local body of water, collect the acidity for 6 weeks, type it into their computer, just like this toilet model in Japan, where you have lots of people all over town adding information to the system. You have 6th grade kids all over the country adding information around acid rain, and it all flows to one computer in Washington, D.C. And anytime you want, you can go to Washington, D.C. on your computer and pull all the data from across the country, and it shows up on a color-coded map of the United States, and you can see in colors the pattern of acid rain from the West Coast to the East Coast, which is how it flows. In real time, you can get a picture of acid rain that day. Now, when you go up to children who are in that classroom and you ask them, what are you doing? And you might want to do this. I love to visit classes and just ask children, what are you doing? Most children will tell me that they're doing something because their teacher told them to do something. That they're taking a test, or they're filling out a worksheet, or they're reading in the book, or they're filling out a problem. The teacher told them to do something. They're in the test preparation business. In this classroom, you ask children, what are you doing? And they give you a very strange answer. They say that they're making a difference. And I'm confused. And I say, making a difference to whom? And they say, the country needs this data. Real scientists use our data. If we don't come to school tomorrow and type in the local data from the local lake, the country is going to be missing our data point. The teacher had them understanding this. The reason that these children are going to school is to make a contribution to their community. That's what they think. Do you know how exciting it is to teach a class where the children are convinced that the reason they're in class is to make a contribution, is to add value to the world, compared to the best class where the job description, where kids think the reason they're in class is to take a test? Those are two very different professional experiences. In one, you have students who are demanding to go to school in the summertime, which is a royal pain, by the way. And in the other, you have students who can't wait to get out of school in the summertime. That is, I think things are so exciting if we were to reconfigure the job of kids, and I'm going to build on this from now on, before we add technology. We know enough about cognitive development and enough about technology and enough about organizational design and enough about assessment that if we wanted to, students would refuse to go to summer camp because school would be so exciting. And motivation, inspiring kids, would be a very different business than in the test preparation business. So let me show you a little video of another example. This one is down in Eden Prairie. I don't know.
Am I afraid of a computer? No. All it is a typewriter plugged into a telephone. Why should I be afraid of it?
Minnesota is a beautiful place to grow up. It does get a little cold here in the winter, but it's a wonderful place to raise kids. Remember that these people are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and sometimes over 100 years old.
My name is Jeff Holke, and I teach 6th grade at Central Middle School in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I love teaching because I love working with kids, I love learning myself, and I love growing along with them. I love to see growth in students, to see new things, to see things in new ways. I've recently moved, and I don't get to see my old friends very much. Did you ever move away from any of your friends or family? If so, how did you feel? And what advice do you have for me? That's really neat. We have a telecommunications project between students here at the middle school with seniors in nursing homes from around the Twin Cities area, which is on the IRIS network. Kids write questions and letters to people on computers in school, which we electronically send to a nursing home, and they will write back.
Dear Harvey, I'm interested in computers at school. I hear one of your first jobs was in communication. What was it like? Ross and Lott.
My name is Tony Siebenauer. I've been asking some questions about some animals they love.
Do you have animals now?
Yeah, I got a fish and a turtle.
And you have a turtle. So.
Yeah.
And then you've written some things to the people in the nursing home about your turtles
Yeah.
and things, haven't you? It's great. Telecommunications breaks down any of the barriers of age. You don't have to worry about listening and hearing each other. You don't have to worry about terminology. You can just communicate.
First got our new car, that we got a Model A car and I didn't know how to drive.
There we are.
And the gate was shut. And then he went right through the gate and he yelled, "Oh!"
I learned to telegraph when I was about 10 years old. I worked till I was 72.
Say, Harvey, look here. You got a letter. Dear Harvey, I'm interested in computers at school. I hear your first job was in communication. What was it like? Russ Lamont.
Dear Rod, we didn't have computers when I went to school. It was, when I started to work, it was telegraph with dots and dashes. I didn't have a typewriter. I copied them by hand. A is a dot and a dash. B is a dash and 3 dots. C.
Say, Harvey, here I got another letter. It says, Dear Emma, my mom and dad are divorced. It makes me feel real bad.
Sometimes I cry a lot. How can I feel better? Aaron.
Aaron, my heart aches for you. It isn't that your mom and dad don't love you. It's just that they don't get along with each other. And if you were here, I'd give you a big hug. I love you. Emma.
Sometimes we will take a field trip to the nursing home and take students there to meet the people that we've been writing to. Emma, this is Aaron.
Oh, hi. Hi. This is for you.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. So are you.
This is my turtle.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Sucker, didn't I? The wake-up call. The reason I show that video is it's obvious about mathematics and science that we can do things with networks and have kids create information products. There's just an awful lot there. And I can talk about those other examples. But what's less obvious is that we have a chance to use technology to strengthen a sense of community. We have a chance to make kids feel connected to parts of their community because of these technologies where we've never been able to do that before without extensive field trip work. And so for those educators who are concerned that the technologies are going to take away our human qualities and ruin our social skills, that's a question of vision. We're either going to create a vision for our schools where technology enhances the sense of community and we can deliver that, or we'll default. We will not create a vision. And I would be concerned because if you have a kid at home, how many of you have kids at home, in your own home? Yeah, and how many of you have technology in those homes with those kids? Well, a lot. We do know that these technologies are very seductive and kids can get sucked right in and forget to go to recess. And forget to do some other things. So we really do need to teach whole communities about how these technologies can come together and enhance our sense of community. But the other reason I show this video is I actually helped put it together, was in that classroom, had the cameras set up. And I can tell you, high level of confidence, that you can take that teacher out of the classroom and those kids are still writing to those senior citizens. They don't stop when the teacher leaves. And this is now my test for teaching. Can you take the teacher out of the classroom, walk down the hall, get a cup of coffee, hang out for 10, 15 minutes, go back, and have this class still functioning? And classrooms that now look chaotic, and our definition of good teaching might radically change. Because if you walk into a classroom that's very highly organized, tensions on the teacher, you take that teacher out, and the class falls apart, I would suggest that there's something wrong with the classroom management plan, because the world will not know the teachers of our students. The world is very disorganized, and we need to teach children to work in a world where information is either overwhelming, just huge amounts of it, or there isn't enough of it, or it's not well presented. Almost never do you bump into a problem in the world where the information is extremely well organized and just the right stuff. That's incredibly rare. But there's this concept in the field called making decisions with incomplete information. It's a very powerful concept for me, and the guy that writes about it and describes it is a man named Chris Deedy, futurist. And I was sitting with a friend of mine at a lecture that he was giving in a meeting like this, and I didn't understand at all what he was saying. Make decisions with incomplete information. And this woman nudged me and she said, I know exactly what he means. I got married with incomplete information. That is, most of the big decisions that we make, we don't have the whole picture. And we have to learn how to course correct along the way. You went into teaching and I went into teaching with incomplete information, and the world's about to turn on us in this decade as it never has before on our profession. But the most difficult task of all, I think, is not how to use the technology. My sense is that's relatively straightforward. Turn the thing on, learn how to use some software. That's easy. What's difficult is for those of us who went into teaching to make meaning for children, to be at the center of making meaning for them, to know what it's like to connect kids to knowledge and skills, and to watch their face light up when they can finally solve a problem, to be told by someone like me that I have a news bulletin for you, that when you get phones, how many of you have phones in your classrooms? Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. When the rest of you get phones, and you get on these global networks, we're no longer going to be at the center of making meaning for our students. Senior citizens and scientists at NASA and schools around the country who are all studying the same problem, and other teachers are going to help our students make meaning out of the world. And more students will come to realize that they can do things without us. Now, that makes our job more important than ever. I'm not making a case that teachers are not needed. What I'm making the case for is that we don't need to be the sole deliverer of information. And I think our job becomes much more interesting, because now we're going to move, and this is the big aha for me, we're going to move from the test preparation business as the primary business of the schools to the community development business. And we are going to help parents understand how to work with their children, and we are not going to be alone anymore. My sense is that teaching is the loneliest profession in America. It's one of the only professions where you can find the professional adult doing their work without any other adult in the room. It's almost impossible to find that in any other profession, at least a telephone. We're going to go from the loneliest profession in America to one that's completely networked. Let me give you a sense of what that might look like. I will try to make a case that a teacher who writes the exams, let me give you an example of exams in real time compared to paper. Paper time exam, you write the exam that morning, go to the copy machine, or you wrote it the night before or 10 years before. Yes, back to you, you know? I bet there's a teacher in this room who has exams for 10 years. There must be one, right? Don't point. You do? Great, fine. Okay, there's one honest person in the room. All right, now, when you hand out that exam cannot change itself in real time. You give the same exam to every kid in the room. SATs are moving to a real-time exam. That is, you take the exam on an infrared keyboard, and depending on how you answered the first question, the second question changes for you. Depending on how you answer the first two, you get a different third. The exam literally writes itself while you're taking it off of a database of thousands of exam questions. In the world of real-time exams, no one student gets the same exam, and it's much more refined as it's written while the student is taking it to really be accurate, more accurate than the exam you wrote last night, this morning, or 10 years ago. It's very powerful. None of you can run around and change the exam questions while your students are taking the test. You just can't do it. Now, imagine we have the technologies, and we do, that it all exists. I'm not making any of this up. It exists today. Now, if students are taking exams in real time, that means report cards are not needed every 10 weeks. Report cards are done in real time. I don't want to be a parent waiting for my report card in 10 weeks. I want to know that day. And I can in a real-time world. We have all of that technology today. Real time. Now, when we shift to real time, even when you're giving assignments like writing papers, no longer multiple choice things, why would you want to correct your own students' work? Here's a ridiculous sounding question for you. Why wouldn't you want to send all of your students' work to another teacher in another school who's teaching the same thing you're teaching? They don't know your students. They don't have any biases. And you receive the work of their students. Or, depending on what assignment you're writing, haiku poetry, for example. This is an example that I heard about. In England, a teacher is giving the assignment to the class to write haiku poetry. The teacher knows some things about networks and meets a teacher in Japan who is teaching haiku poetry across the networks. The teacher in England says to the teacher in Japan on email, electronic mail, would you mind if I just emailed all of my students' poetry to you and you correct it? Teacher in Japan said, fine, I'll do that. The teacher in Japan corrects the work and has this fundamental question for the teacher in England. Do you understand haiku poetry? This teacher had been teaching haiku poetry for 15 years, had the rhythms right, had the structure right, but haiku apparently is a life-giving form. It honors life. And these kids were writing about some pretty morbid scenes. So now, because you're sharing the work of students when you give the haiku experiment to a teacher who really knows haiku, it's also staff development. Staff development is in real time. Not after school time, let's cancel school. This is very expensive staff development time. It's going to move to 2.5 hours equivalent a day for you. Real time. And imagine in this room, imagine the knowledge in this room. What if we decided that certain teachers are really good at certain kinds of assignments? There's no reason now why we couldn't treat this group as if it were one collective organizational strength rather than lots of individual people. Back at Motorola, it turns out that Motorola knows that they can buy the same technology as any other company on the planet. Buying technology is easy. What differentiates one company from another around quality is the capacity of the organization to use the wisdom of the people who work there in real time. And what would this school system look like if you decided that the collective knowledge and wisdom of the faculty was greater than the sum of the individual teachers? And you created a networked environment where the expectation was collegiality and collaboration. And that teachers didn't have to feel that they had to design the tests, teach the lesson, and correct the tests and do it all. One, it's a presumptuous notion. It presumes that you can do it all, and I'm here to tell you that you can't. You're not that good. No one is. You'll burn out. Teaching will burn you out. June will come along, and you can't wait for the summer. But in a more collegial atmosphere, and we have the technologies coming, I think it's going to fundamentally shift, and it'll be a much more interesting job. Imagine all the knowledge and wisdom in this room right now. Tremendous amount of it. Does the organization take advantage of tapping in to the collective knowledge and wisdom in this room at all? Never mind in real time. And if this is the typical good public school system in the United States, the answer is no. So the key to technology is not improving the current reality, not taking the current assignments that we do and add technology to it. The key to technology is redescribing the job description of children. And from there, the job description of the adults. And from there, the job description of the whole community. And I think it's the most exciting time to be in the field. It's unbelievably exciting. All right, let me just stop there for a moment and give you something to really get you mad. I think there are only 4 competencies in the world. From being unconsciously incompetent to unconsciously competent. In the test preparation business in my school, we are trying to teach students to be unconsciously competent. And I bet you are too. This is your ultimate goal. You're going to let me get away with that? Let me explain how. In my school, Glenbrook North High School, we send 50 kids a year to the advanced placement calculus exam. That's a lot of kids. Everyone who takes calculus has to take the advanced placement exam. No choice. In the last 3 years, only 1 kid has not scored a perfect 5. That's unheard of. 1 kid did not score a perfect 5. The goal of our calculus teachers is to get kids into that exam. They see the question. They already know how to answer that question. They have seen every question on the exam. That's how you get a 5. It's the only way to get a 5 on the advanced placement calculus exam. Our job is to make kids unconsciously competent. You see the exam question, and we've got ACT scores and SAT scores out the roof. We're good. We're incredibly good. People come from miles around to see how we do it. Well, that's great if you're preparing kids for the 1950s. It's great. But the deal is, in a world where the information is changing so fast, we're spending all this time preparing kids for these exams to be unconsciously competent. And then you read Howard Gardner's work, the guy that talks about multiple intelligences. How many by chance have read his book called The Unschooled Mind? 1? This is the scariest book in the field that I've read, The Unschooled Mind. What Gardner describes is he goes to some of the best institutions of learning, colleges, and he takes the children, the students, these are young adults now, outside of the context of where they took the exam, ask them the same kinds of things in a different way, and most of them flunk. Harvard Medical School. Give you one more example. Harvard Medical School in the late 1980s did a study, and they figured out that within a year, 90% of their students forgot 90% of what they learned the year before. This is the Harvard Medical School. They take some pretty bright kids in the Harvard Medical School. 90% loss within a year. Are you doing better than that? You want to go test your kids, give them the exams they took a year ago? See how well they do? What's the point? The test preparation business. Now, if it's true that we're gearing kids up to be unconsciously competent, we're in trouble. My goal is this. Let me just go through these real quick. Unconscious incompetence is kind of obvious, but just in case, means you don't know it exists and you don't know how to use it. Any questions on that? I'll give you an example. If you own a 1990 Honda Accord or a car more recent than that, or in that scale, a little bit lower now, you have the power of a supercomputer from 1979. It took from 79 to 89 to take a supercomputer, the power of that, and stick it in a Honda Accord. You got anti-lock brakes? You don't know that you have a supercomputer in your car, you don't know how it works, and you don't care. You're unconsciously incompetent. All right, then you become consciously incompetent. You go, okay, now I know something, but I don't know how it works. And you're aware now that maybe you don't know how something works. That's okay? You're consciously incompetent. Then you become consciously competent. You have to think about it while you're doing it. You know it, you're able to do it, but you got to constantly look up directions and help menus and ask for help, and you're in that kind of mode. And then finally you get to unconsciously competent. I can wake you up in the middle of the night, you're still groggy, stick you in a classroom, and you'll teach half asleep. You're unconsciously competent about your business. You do it. Okay. Now, my sense is the test preparation business hovers around here, and my personal goal is that I want to become consciously incompetent. I've got to figure out what I don't know. This is the deal for me. I've got to constantly figure out. It took me to about, I was 40 years old before I got this concept that the stuff that I didn't know was a lot more than the stuff I did know. And when I became a Christa McAuliffe, and I went back to my school and tried to share with my colleagues, wait a minute, there's a whole world out there. And my other colleagues, we literally had to leave. Because educational cultures, so many of them, are self-conserving operations. So here I am, trying to figure out what could we really do, you know? So let me stop here for a moment and see if there's any comment from, and I can't see over here, by the way, the ballet lights, I understand the ballet's coming in this afternoon, are in my eyes. Are you doing anything more than automating with technology? No? You wouldn't say it anyway, would you? I mean, look at your own behavior now. It would be so unusual for someone to speak in a large group like this, because it's so unusual for the large group to get together, and the risk that you'd be taking to share knowledge and wisdom at this moment would be too great in our culture. Oh, yeah?
Are we supposed to change?
How?
What are we supposed to change?
Are you? No. You're not supposed to change. See, that's the saddest. See, as long as you have those college admission scores, no school can make the change that you would even like to make yourself. I bet if we locked random selected people in this room, in a smaller room, for 5 days and said, give us your best ideas of what the school system would look like, it'd be done. It'd be phenomenal. I know I don't have all. I know that I'm not saying anything you don't already know. I get this. What I'm saying is that don't be fooled by technology because you're adding it, that you think you're improving the quality of instruction, other than incremental ways. And the only way to be able to change is that coalition building is the key skill for educational leaders for the 90s. That with these networks coming, the key operation is to get the admissions people at the university together with the school people, together with the business community. It's the only way I see out of this mess. Collectively, we say, what do we value for society? What should our schools be doing? I would never, in my wildest dreams anyway, trust educators to design the future school system by themselves. They haven't had phones for most of their career. By the way, we've just added phones. Every teacher in my school system has a phone on their desk. It's made no change. It's made absolutely no change. Another question? Any questions of the difference between automating that Japanese toilet, between automating and informating? Is that, you can ask just a standard classroom question there if you like. Well, let's go to the plumber, shall we? Who's your plumber? The plumber is sitting in an office with a computer. Because the phone line is connected to your toilet system, you can monitor water pressure remotely. The plumber will know that you have a leak before you do. And she also has to deal now with telephone. Did you get that? Don't be sexist. Let women apply for blue-collar jobs. But you know about blue-collar? Here's a news bulletin that I received. 7 years ago, the average auto mechanic salary equaled the average teacher's salary in the United States. This year, the average auto mechanic equaled the average superintendent's salary in the United States. What's happening in the country, in case you didn't already know this, and you probably already did, I don't know why I'm telling you all this stuff you already know, but I'll tell it anyway, is that what we used to call blue-collar workers are now becoming more and more important, not less. And their technical skills and their abstract thinking skills are rising, not going down. And those of us who are college educated in the traditional sense, according to some, are becoming more and more useless in the larger society. We're very successful in schools. But if we had to go out and operate, we're becoming less and less capable of doing so. To give you an example, at John Deere, which I can relate to because it's in Peoria, Illinois, not far where I live. John Deere just about went out of business in the 1980s, and they discovered that blue-collar workers were not valued for their minds, and that the best resource the company had was not the computers, but it was the minds of their blue-collar workers. And so what they did is they fired the managers. Gone. And the blue-collar worker today works on a computer screen. And that computer screen runs a bunch of robot welders that weld different pieces for the tractors. And that guy who sits there, we'll call him John, in Peoria, Illinois, he's online in real time with a welder in Germany on the second shift, Fritz. And the two of them in English, because John doesn't speak German, the two of them communicate across the networks, and they try to share with each other how to improve the robot welders. They have the same kind of job. They job share. No manager. The manager used to tell John when to show up for work, when to take breaks, what to weld, how to weld, and if he was doing a good job welding. He's now responsible for his own work. It's a blue-collar worker. Blue-collar workers in this country have more technology and more freedom over making choices than a lot of teachers have. The irony of this discussion is that the industrial model we resemble it more than industry does in a global economy. From plumbers to factory workers, they will pass our salaries. Auto mechanics have already passed superintendents. The rules have changed. So you got to ask yourself, why do you value what you value on those tests? How do you know the truth? How do you know? It's a shifting truth. The room got very quiet. I must have touched a sore spot. And my sense is, I don't know where the truth is either. All I know is I don't know. I used to think I knew a lot about education. The people who scare me the most now are the people who are convinced they know what good teaching looks like and are not willing to let go of current reality and look at other models. How could you possibly know in an age where the technologies are coming so fast and there's so much research and cognitive development and organizational design? You can't possibly know anymore. We used to be able to know. And the only way out of this is to be a team, is to figure out a way where the collective knowledge in this room is shared by everybody in the room. And I'll give you an example of how to do that. In my school, a year ago, I figured out that we had a very funny teacher. This guy is a riot. And humor, in all of the research, looks like it's very, very important in teaching. Humor is an unbelievably important technology. By the way, the definition of technology is that it's any tool that can expand the mind's capacity to solve a problem. Humor is a technology. Cooperative learning is a technology. Paper is a technology. Everybody in this room is into technology. It's just a technology of your choice. So I went to the humor guy, biology teacher, and I said, you've got to teach other teachers about being funny. And he didn't laugh at me. He said, I can't do that. You can't teach people to be funny. And I said, yeah, what you can do is you can teach teachers to take advantage of funny moments in their classrooms. They don't have to be funny. They just have to learn how to deal with funny moments. And you have that skill. I've seen you. See, I'm one of the only people in the school who knows how teachers teach because I wander around plugging their computers in. And while I'm doing that, I watch them. I'm one of the only people who gets the whole pattern, which I think is pretty stupid. I think everybody ought to wander around for a day and watch your colleagues teach. That's probably the single most powerful thing you could do. Take a day, substitute day, everybody gets to watch everybody else. So, in watching This Guy's Funny, he now teaches a humor course. Took me a month to convince this guy. I said, look, use technology. Videotape HBO. Videotape sitcoms. Videotape comedians. Videotape your classroom. Gather this material together and design a course. And he does, and it's a very successful course. We're now up to half the teachers in my high school teaching staff development from 0 2 years ago. Every single day after school, there's a course that you can take in my high school, sometimes 4 or 5. There's a 4-step plan, I think, in moving forward. This is my formal conclusion. I'll stop rambling after this. Step 1 is we have to honor the knowledge and wisdom of teachers. There's a tremendous amount of knowledge. Don't let me come in here, or people like me, and convince you that you're not doing it right unless I know enough to honor the wisdom that you already have. The problem is, our knowledge and our wisdom have not been honored for so long in a collective sense, that when you go up to a colleague and you say, you're really good at humor or cooperative learning or designing exams or whatever it is that you're good at, a lot of teachers will not want to teach their colleagues how to do this, and I can't figure out why that's so. But we're up to half. The goal is every teacher teaches teachers. That's the goal. Step one, we're going to honor the knowledge and wisdom of teachers. Step two, we're going to honor the knowledge and wisdom of children. We're going to absolutely convince children that they can make a difference to the world, that they're important, and that their knowledge can be applied to describe new information products, whether it's acid rain. I think fax machines ought to be in every hallway in an elementary school. I think kids ought to come out of art, stick their art in a fax machine, and it ought to be popping out of companies all over this region. Papers. How many parents do you think have access to fax machines at work? More and more of them do. Real time. In fact, I'll give you a sense of honoring teachers. Teachers honoring parents that I thought was incredible. In Anchorage, Alaska, teacher buys himself a cellular phone. He has a discipline problem in the classroom. Constant discipline problems. Buys himself a phone. And I'm thinking, he's going to go up to a kid and threaten to call home instead of sending the kid to the office. And I got it wrong. What this teacher does is whenever the kid does something well, he hands the phone to the kid and he says, call a parent and explain to the parent the good thing you just did. And then the teacher takes the phone and he explains the good thing the kid just did, and he's got a little speakerphone set up to the cellular thing, and the whole class cheers for this kid. And then he hangs up. That's a parent conference in real time. Not after school time, real time. And this teacher, fourth grade teacher, does this 10 times a day, every day. And there is no more discipline problem in this classroom. Because those children are honored for the good thing they're doing, and the parents are brought right into it in real time. The whole relationship. Do you know that schools are designed to keep parents out? And all the research says that parents are the single most important variable in the success of a kid's education, and we've designed the buildings to keep them out. With technology, we can bring them back in real time. So we honor the teachers, we honor the parents, we honor the children. Children are solving more and more sophisticated problems in the community, from physics to chemistry. Little kids are faxing off their artwork. The whole thing is community-oriented, and when we do that, the community will honor us in ways that it never has before. They will realize when they drive by these schools that the school is an invaluable resource for the community, rather than a place that takes the children for 12 years. It's an unbelievable time. How many of you do parent conferences in real time? A third of you said you had phones in your classroom. You're not using your phone to call parents when kids are doing good. You don't know how to use your phone. You see, you knew how to use the phone. It's not a question of learning the technology. It's a question of changing the relationships of human beings that we have with each other. Take the phone, give it to the kid. I know you probably have phones that have wires connected to the wall. Don't get those phones. Don't buy those phones. Buy phones where you can walk around the whole room. Think about using your phones if you've got them. All right. Now I'm going to end in this one little bit here. The military calls me in every once in a while. On their desk, their drawing board, is a satellite receiving antenna that's going to be on kids' bodies by the end of the decade. What are you going to do when your students, and Sega and Nintendo are probably going to make the little thing, When your kids have a satellite cellular digital telephone on their bodies, it means that they can pull down information from the sky. Motorola and Microsoft are launching competing satellite networks that will circle the globe. Big computers in those satellites, all the information in them that you'd like to have. And your students are going to have that capacity to call a satellite. They'll get phones before you do. Pull that down. So the only way to survive this onslaught, and I haven't begun to describe what already exists, the onslaught of technology that's coming, we have got to work together. So step one in this honoring teachers is for teachers to honor each other. It shouldn't be that someone like me gets to leave for a while and gets to come back and then gets kicked out. Somehow, even pain-in-the-butt people like me ought to have some way that we can come back to our colleagues and tell the stories of what's going on outside without being a threat. And unless we can do that, the rest of the technology won't matter. It just won't matter. It's the collegial sense that we need to move forward. Microsoft knows it. Motorola knows it. Apple knows it. The best technology are the people in the building, not the things. But we don't treat each other that well. So with that, I'll conclude. And we should take a break, shouldn't we? Go walk for 5 minutes. I can't sit still this long. I've been walking anyway. And then we'll do questions. We'll chat some more. I'll provoke you to think a little bit more. Thanks for sitting through this. You've been terrific to do that. You should need a bank I'll answer that question too. Okay, I'll tell you what. Jerry, could you shut the door back? Are people still coming in? I'm going to assume that you're all talking about really good ideas, sharing your knowledge and wisdom. I'll tell you. Algebra? Okay. Are you a math teacher? Okay, here's the deal. In my school, we have a Macintosh lab just for Algebra 1. We've discovered lots of ways to save time. For example, it used to take 6 days to teach students to look at an equation, lots of different kinds of equations, and sketch the graph. It used to take us 6 days, because you have to teach every kind of equation. Parabolas, hyperbolas, linear equations, all those equations have a different kind of sketch, don't they? Then if you change variables, the graph slightly changes, flattens out, gets deeper, right? That now takes us 1 day. All right, now, imagine we can do this in a bunch of different places in algebra. Knock 4 or 5 days out of here, 4 or 5 days out of there. It looks like algebra shrinks to about 6 weeks from a year. Can you imagine that? I mean, I don't know why I say that. Well, imagine, just trust me on it for a moment. Okay. If algebra shrank to 6 weeks, we have a choice. We fire 5/6 of the algebra teachers, or we get kids to apply math in more sophisticated ways than they ever have. And that's what I hope will happen. See, connected to your question was the woman across the hall from you asked aisle from you asked a very similar question about technology balance. What's the worst thing that can happen with technology? You got to ask that question. It's a really interesting question. What's the worst thing that can happen with technology? The worst thing that can happen with technology is some parents will go buy it. And they'll really understand how to use it. You see, right now, most parents don't know how to use technology to help their kids learn. Now, picture before technology what the imbalance looked like. The best you could get at home was an encyclopedia. So some families had encyclopedias and some didn't. With technology in the home, the difference is that some children will have access to libraries and information all over the world and in real time, and some parents will figure out quickly how to hook their kid to a NASA scientist, and some parents will figure out that once they learn how to plug a computer into a telephone line, the whole world for their kid changes, compared to parents that don't know how to do this. Now the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots is huge. The metaphor for that is, what's the worst thing that can happen if we build highways? And I went to the library and pulled these 1950s movies. In fact, I've got one in my computer, stored in the computer. The whole movie's in there. It's a 1950s movies predicting the wonderment of building the highway system, which didn't start till the 1950s. The predictions were all good. That the highways, they called them ribbons of concrete. We're going to have these beautiful ribbons of concrete taking people from city to city. That's not what happened. What happened was we built suburbs, totally unpredictable. We then built shopping malls, totally unpredictable. What followed the shopping malls, as I drove out of Minneapolis, honest to God, if I didn't see an office building in a farm field rise right out of the farm field. So people moved out, and then the stores moved out, and the phase that we're in now is the jobs are moving out. Do you get this? Unpredictable, lots of car accidents. We're killing 45, 50,000 people a year. Drunk driving. All kinds of things that were never predicted, but the worst thing that happened with the automobile, with that technology, the worst thing that happened is LA burned last summer. Because what the automobile did is it polarized our society. And I made fun of that at the beginning when I came in. Automobile technology segregated the schools more than in 1954 when the Supreme Court desegregated them in a case called Brown versus the Board of Topeka. The Chicago schools are more segregated in 1994 because of the suburbs and automobile technology than in 1954. The automobile technology, and it's quite possible that our inner cities, more and more of them, will be unlivable, and we will leave those people behind forever. Because a lot of people chose to get in their car and go build in the suburbs. We just left those other people behind. Now, the new highways that are coming, information highways, I think are much more profound around polarizing our society than automobile highways. Because I can create wealth wherever I can get my little computer to a phone. In fact, sometimes I just race to my hotel room. I have these fixes. I've got to get on the net. I get on the net. This morning, I'm talking to a client in Houston, Dallas. GTE is a big client of mine. They've asked me to write a document for them. I'm on the phone. I'm on my computer. I can be anywhere in the world, and I can charge quite a lot of money for that, too. If you don't know how to gain access to the information highways. You don't know how to take information off the net, add value to it, massage it, and give it back and charge money for it, you're not going to have a job. So my fear about education is that schools will produce a more polarized society than ever before. Whichever schools understand that their students need to access information around the world and in real time and solve very sophisticated problems, they will be producing students who can create wealth, who will have a job, and schools that don't understand that, who don't have access to that kind of vision, will be creating students who literally will not work for the rest of their lives. And I'm not exaggerating. You go to England, and I think England is a predictor for what will happen to the United States. They lost their empire before we did. And when you go to England, I have a friend who's a headmaster in Manchester. It used to be mining. They don't have any information technologies there. In that school, 30% of the graduating students will not work for the rest of their lives. Period. That makes teaching really tough. And I think we have enough technology to automate almost every menial task in the country. We just haven't applied it yet. McDonald's, Burger King, those jobs are gone. Middle management, John Deere, Xerox, those jobs are gone. Just like when John Deere invented the tractor and we invented fertilizer and we wiped out 9 out of 10 farming jobs. We wiped out whole communities. Do you think if a farming community knew that if it got a tractor and if it got fertilizer and if it got pesticides and some of these other technologies, that you'd be wiping out farm families? You'd be wiping out their schools, that they would have gone for it? No. That all snuck up on them. That technology forever changed the culture of farming communities. And the technologies that we have now that are just beginning to come will forever change the culture of the community you live in, whether you like it or not. Just like those farmers. They didn't know what was going to hit them. So there needs to be a balance. We need to know what are all the good things technology will bring, but we can't afford to be naive. We have to ask ourselves, okay, what are all the bad things? The problem is technology is not neutral. You can't just say, because I've told you now that these are these bad things, we shouldn't get it. You have to get it. The question is, what vision will you create? Think doctors like the fact? How do you think a doctor is going to feel when you tell your family doctor that you own this toilet? And that you can send the data to 2 doctors, or 3 doctors, or 4 doctors, and that you're going to shop around for doctors. You see, people don't shop for doctors. Just like they never used to shop for cars. General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford were convinced that the American public would never buy a Japanese car, no matter how much better and cheaper they were, because we fought those people in World War II. And the American public would never, ever walk away from Detroit. Well, we all know now that General Motors got it wrong. The American people will buy Japanese products. And I'm here to tell you that the American people will walk away from their public school system too.
What's your take on Lewis Perlman?
Well, he and I have been on panels together. One, he does not have children and he's never been married. So he has a different view of the world, I think. Two, Lewis Perelman says that technology will wipe out schools. In the current job description, I agree with him. No teacher here can design a real-time test, much more efficient by a computer. No teacher in this room can provide the kind of visual information and instant feedback and networks that computers can provide. So in the test preparation business, if the school's primary business is to deliver information that we already understand, algebra, geometry, history, a bunch of science, literature, and to test kids to see whether they get what we already understand, I would agree with Lewis Perelman that that business has about the rest of the decade to go, and that's it. But if we think school is the place where children are going to gain a sense of self about who they are, a sense of character, a strength of applying their knowledge to solve problems that are not well defined, then schools are in business. Because computers can't do that. See, I think we just ought to make two lists. What do computers do really well that human beings can't do well? Make that list. And give up whatever human beings do now to what computers can do really well. Then we ought to make the list, what can human beings do really well that computers can't do? And focus on that list for the design of what schools and teaching is about. And what's on that list, to me, is the most exciting part of teaching. Computers cannot inspire. Computers cannot motivate. Computers cannot worry about cooperative learning and teamwork. Computers cannot nurture. Computers cannot build social skills. Computers cannot build a sense of character. Human beings do that. In fact, in staff development, the reason that I take the technology budget and fund humor out of the technology budget and call humor technology is because if people don't learn to laugh, I don't think they're whole. That's what schools are going to be about. Or we're out of business. See, in Washington State, in 1990, there were 3,500 homeschoolers. In 1993, there were 14,900 homeschoolers. Homeschooling is the single largest growth area in the K-12 business. Next year, 500 cable channels come to Chicago. I've calculated how long it clicks to go through each channel. And you won't, by the time you get through the whole set, there'll be a different program on. The next round? All right. Yeah. Now, I'll give you a quick quiz. This year, a company called Computer Curriculum Corporation, CCC, aren't they Minnesota born? Aren't they from Minnesota? I think they are. CCC, one of your own companies, this year put the entire preschool to 12th grade curriculum on 3 CDs. Every assignment, every article, a bunch of videos, 35 millimeter slides, all your subjects on 3 CDs. They sell it for $3,000. Who owns CCC? Paramount bought. Simon & Schuster bought CCC, the book publisher, because publishers know that this is the last decade for textbooks. I have 2 textbooks on the market. I work for Glencoe, McGraw-Hill, Macmillan. They've told me from now on it's CD-ROM design. This is the biggest textbook company in the country. So Simon & Schuster bought CCC. Who bought Simon & Schuster? Paramount, the film company. And who bought Paramount? Viacom. Viacom owns MTV. Now, one of the most sophisticated cable production companies owns CCC. They know that 500 channels are going into Chicago. They don't know what to put on these 500 channels. What they're going to put is CCC. There's going to be a channel for physics, a channel for chemistry, a channel for biology, a channel for algebra, a channel for geometry. And I'm going to be sitting on my couch with one of those little clicker things. And I'm going to go to algebra, and it's going to learn every time I make a mistake. It will have a database about every question I answered right and wrong, every single one. And when I click to that channel, the other part to this story that I didn't tell you is the phone companies and the cable companies are merging. Right now, when you watch television on cable, you can't send a signal back. And right now, when you pick up the phone, you can't send video through it. But when those two merge and you're watching television, you can send a signal back. Whoa, Jeopardy! You are playing Jeopardy while you're watching. You get to hit the button before the person in the studio. And you get a score, and you can win money. But if it's not Jeopardy and you're on the algebra channel, it means that you can push the button for the exams and to get new material with instant feedback. Not 25 kids in a classroom. Algebra goes to less than 6 weeks. Homeschooling. Whomp. Lewis Perlman got a lot right. You can't stop it. The numbers are already there. You just can't stop it. Yeah.
You know, one part of that, though, is you still have to do the doing part of it. You're talking about chemistry or else.
The doing you have to do.
You know, you have to apply those skills.
Yes. Yes.
An activity.
Yes.
That technology, you can push all the buttons.
Oh, yes.
You're still going to have that activity.
Yes. Except I would not do that in an individual classroom lab. See, one of my other clients is the government of Israel. The government of Israel feels like they're a really tiny country surrounded by a whole bunch of Arab people. And they're very concerned about the future of their country. So they've decided, Israel has decided to get out of the war business. And they've decided to make peace with the PLO and Syria. And they know this is coming. So what's Israel gearing up for if they're going to get out of the war business? They're going to get into the information business in a big way. Israel is one of the most exciting places to go to see what they're doing with the schools. They're pumping tens of millions of dollars into tiny regions like this to figure out science and mathematics. And here's what they're doing. They've decided that if you're going to run a physics experiment, you might as well run it across an entire region at the same time. Rather than one teacher telling their one class, go have a car slide down a ramp, why don't you get lots of classes to do that with tremendous amounts of data and figure out why there are discrepancies across the region and really drill through subtleties of information. And why don't you have students produce their their lab reports, not with a lab partner they're sitting next to, but with a lab partner in another part of the world, just like John Deere with Germany. So what's interesting is that this technology that we're using today needs to go right down to the classroom level so that kids see themselves as citizens of, I mean, why wouldn't you want to run a physics experiment where your lab partner is an Israeli kid or a Syrian kid? That makes physics a little bit more interesting, and where the teachers are collaborating. Then schools become very interesting places. Communications is probably the single most important skill in all this. Technology biz. Any other? Somebody asked me, why do companies call me up during the break? And I can tell you about George Lucas. The most fun I have is when I get to go to see George Lucas on his ranch. He's got a 3,000-acre ranch called Skywalker Ranch, north of San Francisco. This guy's rich. It's unbelievable. He has horses on herds of horses on distant hillsides just for effect. You know? I mean, it's unbelievable. And in case you didn't know, Lucas hires a lot of technology people, software programmers, and hardware designers to make his films. Star Wars. He did the special effects for Jurassic Park. The software stuff, the dinosaurs running in the background, that's Lucas. So Lucas really understands multimedia. I mean, he can tell a story that will knock your socks off and make you think it's real when it's all done with computers. So Lucas one day figured out that since he's inventing all this multimedia software and he's a storyteller, why doesn't he just give it away free to the schools? Because he's made a lot of money. He doesn't need to make much more. He'll just give it to the schools. So he called me up to say, well, okay, let's give the software to the schools. And I said, well, that's like giving phones to the schools. It won't make any difference. He said, well, what do you mean? Of course it will. Teachers will take this, and it's easy to use. See? And yeah, it's easy to use. And they'll give it to their kids. And I said, no, no, no. What we do is we have a curriculum that for 11 years we teach a child how to write a 5-paragraph essay. That takes 11 years. In order to use this multimedia stuff, we would have to give up teaching kids to write a 5-paragraph essay. And there's a rule in schools. We don't give stuff up. He said, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, teachers were paper trained. That's what they know. So I said, because he wanted me to come in and help him design these multimedia workshops. He was going to have teachers come to San Francisco, the Bay, get a nice place there, and you go for a week and you learn multimedia. And I told him it was a terrible idea. And he believed me, too. What I told him he should do, I said, look, lots of people can go to the Bay, hire a hotel, and do multimedia workshops. I could do that. What can George Lucas do that is unique, that almost no one else in the country can do? If you're going to make a contribution to public education, do it in a way that no one else is going to do it. And he said, what's that? And I said, you are a great storyteller. We don't have pictures in our heads of what education would look like if we had all this stuff. Do the equivalent of Star Wars for education. And he agreed. So what Lucas is doing is he's funding 4-hour-length films. 3 of them are the day in the life of a child, different ages, different parts of the country. One's the day in the life of a teacher in the year 2015. And he's making 500,000 of those films available free. Every governor, state legislatures, senators, school board members, superintendents. Because someone once said that unless you have the metaphor in your head, unless you can see the picture of what it all looks like, you can't begin to get there. So Lucas is making these films. And that's an important contribution for Lucas. Very few people could do what he can do. And it's a ball. What happens is Lucas calls in all the people that we read about, like Michael Fullen from Toronto, and Roy P., who's the dean of the ed school, and people like Howard Gardner. And he gets 12 of these people in a room at the same time with directors and writers sitting on the outside. And these people just go at each other about what the future of education looks like. The scary thing, I've been to 2 of these meetings, is there's no disagreement about the future of education. There are no classrooms in the future. Kids have their own space. Kids go in and they have their own space, just like people at work have their own space. And they have a computer, and teachers move. Teachers are more important than ever. They work with kids in teams at different times of the day. You bring teams together. The computers take care of delivering the information and testing it. That's a low-level task. Computers do that better. teachers worry about the higher level, the creative tasks, there's just no disagreement. It's incredible. No, there's no teachers sitting at the table, but for people who are sort of thinking about it, there's clear agreement. Yeah?
You're an elementary teacher and you're going to teach multiplication.
Multiplication.
Yes. Do you make the kids memorize 5 times 8 or you give them,
No.
give them a calculator?
I give them a calculator.
You don't care that you want.
Yeah, but don't blame me. I mean...
No, I'm asking you.
Okay, my father, and where I get my ideas is you happen to hit on a personal... My father is an applied mathematician. And he solves very complicated problems for General Electric. He's a systems analyst around... He has to design systems to test rocket engines and jet engines. That's his job. And he has to use a tremendous amount of mathematics to build these environments, to simulate space, and moving these engines through very difficult and extreme conditions so they don't blow up when they get in the plane for the first time. They blow up on the ground. And he is just furious. My dad is just furious with the public schools, the way they teach math. My dad thinks that mathematics is one of the most exciting disciplines in the world. And that all kids ought to love it. But when you go watch how it's taught, he could just throw up. He says that kids should not be given equations, that they should be taught to generate their own equations. And we have enough technology to do that now. Because we can build for kids environments, and they can test the environment, and numbers can be generated by the computer to describe what's going on in the environment, and kids will create their own equations. They'll generate. Rather than being told, memorize these, and then go to the exam and give it back. The most extreme case I know of this, by the way, is there's a professor at Harvard named Judah Schwartz who invented the geometric supposer. Do you know this tool, the geometric supposer? Okay. The geometric supposer is a piece of software, and the approach here is that you don't give kids any theorems at all, no theorems. What you do is you let them draw triangles, circles, and squares, and parallelograms. And by doing it over and over and over again and having the computer measure the angles and how many lines are parallel, students generate their own theorems without ever reading a book. The first school that got the software to test gave it to the advanced placement, the best class in geometry. Those kids rejected it. They said, why waste our time? Just tell us what the theorems are, and we'll memorize them that night, and we'll give you the answer the next day. Why would you? And they were totally frustrated, and they had to yank the software out of the class, and they thought it was a total failure. On the way out the door, the teacher teaching the lowest level geometry class said, look, I'll try anything. My kids aren't getting it. Give it to me. So they dumped the software in the lowest level class, and they don't teach the kids the theorem, and lo and behold, the kids get every theorem. They go to take the exam. Kid comes back with a theorem. The teacher says, this is not a theorem. Kid says, it is too. Teacher says, it's not in any book. Kid says, it is too. The teacher called Judah Schwartz at Harvard. Judah Schwartz says it's not a theorem, but saw the kid's work and said, oh my God, it's a theorem that has never been described before. They take this theorem to the World Court of Geometricians, and sure enough, this low-level kid has discovered a theorem that no one else has ever discovered the first time this software is ever used. That's mathematics. Our expectation of kids, who are the brightest kids, who are the dumbest kids, who are the kids who can't get it, who are the kids who get it right away, it's wrong. It's just wrong. If we give kids environments that tap into different parts of the brain, because we know that kids see the world in different ways, they don't all see it in the same way. If we get clever enough to design more and more software, and we can do this, all of a sudden, kids that we think are the dumbest kids are off discovering theorems. It's incredible.
You know, that's what they're doing right now on the East Coast with the Edison project. They're redesigning the
Yes. Yes.
and they're not having pre-algebra and advanced
No.
algebra, they have just algebra, and they're doing exactly what you're saying right now.
Yeah, the Edison project, I think, is going to win. And luckily, they've just called me. I'm going to have a very interesting job. Edison has just asked me if I would try to figure out what would you do, what would the staff development model look like if all teachers had 2.5 hours a day to learn and 6 weeks each summer. That's their model. All teachers. And their other model is that there are different kinds of teachers. There are lead teachers for every team of teachers, and the lead teacher is responsible for the professional growth of everyone on their team. Edison knows that staff development is the single most important factor in designing and maintaining the quality of those schools. It's unbelievably exciting. And if we really wanted to have this conversation, we could look at the current schedule of the school day in this school system and create 2.5 hours a day for every teacher to learn and grow. But that means end, right? Clapping here must mean go home. Because Jerry's walking up.
If we don't stop pretty soon, we're going to have Attack of the Killer Ballerinas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've gone over. I'm sorry. Yeah. The Killer Ballerinas. That's why these lights are in my eyes. The Killer Ballerinas. You've just been a super audience. I don't know where the truth lies. All I know is lots of people are popping up, like George Lucas and Edison and the military. There are people now in education that were never there before, and they've got some unbelievable ideas because they're not starting from the current reality. And we ought to be ripping them off for everything they're worth. And in a conclusion for you guys, just to balance this out, my fear is I also consult for a bunch of governors, and these governors want to create jobs. It's the economy, stupid, and governors want to create jobs. That's like their number one thing. How do you create jobs? Well, some governors think you add technology to the schools, and we prepare kids for a workforce. Schools become workforce preparation sites. This is a real possibility. And in those governors' views, if they don't have your knowledge about nurturing kids, a sense of community, a sense of what's realistic, they will be wrong. I mean, as much as I've been critical about educators, the country simply can't move forward without our wisdom. What I'm afraid of is we'll be so insulted by what people from the outside say to us that we won't be listening to the good ideas they have, and we'll need each other. We're all going to need to be in this together, and that's why I think coalition building is such an essential skill, that we tap in with communication skills and learn how to work with people in industry and in the state legislature and be willing to give up some things. It's an incredibly exciting time, isn't it? Say yes. Just say yes, and have a great afternoon.